In the previous segment, we saw that over the last 2 centuries, the world and human life underwent numerous radical revolutions. But with regard at least to human society and our daily lives, the most important revolution of all was the collapse of the family and of the intimate community, and their replacement by the state and the market. To the best of our knowledge, from earliest times, more than 1 million years ago, humans always lived in small, intimate communities, most of whose members were related to one another by family ties. The cognitive revolution 70,000 years ago and the agricultural revolution did not change that. They glued together families and communities to create tribes and cities and kingdoms and empires. But all these mergers did not break families and communities, which continued to be the basic building bricks of all human societies. You could live in a city or empire or kingdom, but still the basic structure, the basic unit of life was the family or the local community. The Industrial Revolution, on the other hand, managed within little more than 2 centuries to break these built-in blocks of families and communities into atoms, into individuals. Most of the traditional functions of families and communities were handed over during the last 2 centuries to the state or to the market. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, the daily life of most men and women was dominated by the nuclear family, the extended family, all the aunts and uncles and so forth, and the local intimate community. Most people worked in family businesses, such as the family farm or the family workshop. Say you were a shoemaker, so your family had a workshop of shoes, and this is where you worked. Alternatively, if your family was poor and did not own a farm or a workshop, you worked in the farm or workshop of your neighbors, of somebody in your community. The family was not only the main provider of work, the family was also the welfare system, the health system. If you fell sick, the family was the one that took care of you. If you grew old, the family supported you. Your children were the only pension fund you could have. There were no organized pension funds of the state or of the market. Children were the only kind of pension. And if you died at a young age and left young children behind you, then the family, and not the state, was the one that took care of the orphans. Similarly, if you wanted to build a house, then you went to your cousins and uncles to ask for help in building the house. If you wanted to open a business, then the family provided you with the necessary knowledge and money to open the business. If you wanted to get married, and even if you didn't want to get married, the family chose for you, or at least vetted, your prospective husband or wife. If you came into conflict with somebody else, then there was no police usually to handle matters. You had to rely on the help from your family. And if the conflict was too severe, or if there was some other problem which the family could not handle by itself, then the local community was the one that came to the rescue to try to solve the problem, not the king or the emperor. The community offered people help on the basis of local traditions and on the basis of an economy of favors, which was very different from the laws of supply and demand that govern the free markets of today. For example, in an old-fashioned medieval community, say your neighbor went someplace and needed somebody to look after his sheep, or your neighbor wanted to build a house and needed help, so he would come to you and ask for your help, and you will help him, guarding his sheep or helping to build his house without receiving any payment in return. And after some time, when you needed help, then the neighbor helped you again, without any kind of money exchanging places between you. At the same time, the local nobleman, if you lived in a medieval village, the local nobleman might have drafted all of you and your neighbors in the village to construct his castle without paying you a single coin. In exchange, you counted on this nobleman to defend you against brigands and robbers and barbarians. So again, it wasn't like a free market with supply and demand and money and so forth. It was a very different kind of economy. Village life involved many transactions, but very few payments. You did not pay for most of the things that you needed. You did not buy most of these things. There were some markets in the modern sense of the word, places where you can go and buy stuff from people you didn't know, but very few items were bought in such places. Most of the things that people needed for their lives, they manufactured themselves, or they got from neighbors and family members and friends. In markets, you bought perhaps just 10% of your needs, all kinds of rare spices and clothes and tools and the services of lawyers and doctors and so forth. So less than 10% of what you needed in life you bought on the market. Most of your needs were taken care of by your family or by your community. Now, there was, of course, larger systems of kingdoms and empires and so forth. And these kingdoms and empires, they performed important tasks like waging wars and building roads and constructing palaces and cathedrals. And for these purposes, the kings taxed you and your neighbors and enlisted soldiers and laborers. However, with very few exceptions, most of the kings and emperors and sultans and so forth, they did not intervene in the daily affairs, in the daily life of families and communities. Even if they wanted to decide how you should live your life, most kings could not do so. Because in traditional agricultural economies, there were very few surpluses with which to feed crowds of government officials and policemen and teachers and doctors and social workers and other government employees. Consequently, most rulers simply did not have the ability to develop mass welfare systems, mass healthcare systems, educational systems, school, nurseries, hospitals, and so forth. They left all these matters of education and welfare and health, etc., in the hands of families and communities. Very often, kings lacked not only the money, but also the transportation and communication infrastructure, without which it was impossible to intervene in the affairs of remote communities. So many kings, many rulers preferred to give up even the most basic royal prerogative functions, such as taxation and violence, and to allow local communities to manage taxation and violence by themselves. For example, in the Ottoman Empire 200 years ago, family vendettas were used in order to provide justice and law and order, instead of maintaining a huge police force and imperial courts. If my cousin, for example, murdered somebody, then the family of the murdered person could murder me in retaliation for what my cousin did. And the logic was that because people knew it, then each family will take care to control its own members, not allowing them to go and murder somebody, because each family knew. If one of our family members murders somebody from another family, they may murder one of us, not necessarily the murderer, somebody else. So there was cause for the families to control the members and keep violence level down. Similarly, in Imperial China, in the Chinese Ming Empire, that ruled between the 14th and the 17th century in China, the population was organized into what was called the Baojia system. Every 10 families were grouped together to form a group called Jia, and every 10 Jia constituted a Bao. When a member of a Bao committed a crime, other Bao members could be punished for it, in particular the Bao elders, and this collective punishment gave them incentive to look after what the people in the community are doing and to prevent them breaking the law. Similarly, taxes were levied on the Bao, not on individuals. Like the state, the emperor would come and say, this particular Bao has to pay 100 silver ingots. And it was the responsibility of the Bao elders, not of state official, to assess the economic situation of each family and determine how much tax each family could pay. What today is done by state officials in Imperial China was done by the local elders and the leaders of the family. Many kingdoms and empires were therefore can be seen as no more than a large protection racket. Like with the mafia today, that the local mafia is taking protection money from you, and the only thing it gives you in return is a promise that they won't kill you and they will protect you from the mafia of the next neighborhood. This exactly is what kings and emperors throughout history provided. The king would come to you and say, okay, you give me money, I won't kill you, and I will make sure that the king of the next country won't kill you either. That's it. This is the only thing that most kings and emperors did throughout history. They did not provide education and health and welfare and all the other things which we today expect from the government to do. Life was therefore controlled by families and communities more than by states and markets. It wasn't always good news. Families and communities could oppress their members no less brutally than modern states and modern markets. And the internal dynamics of families and communities were often full of tension and violence. But there was really no other choice. You could not live outside a family or a community. A person who for any reason lost her family or her community, say 300 years ago, was as good as dead. If you had no family, or community, you had no job, no education. If you fell sick, nobody took care of you. If you needed money, nobody gave you money. If you needed protection, nobody gave you protection. Because all these things were done by the families and communities. There were very few, if any, policemen, social workers. There was no state schools and compulsory education. In order to survive, if you were left without a family or a community, in order to survive, you had to very quickly find to yourself an alternative family or an alternative community. Boys and girls who ran away from home could hope at best to become servants in some new home, some new family. If nobody would take them, boys and girls left out of the family protection had only two places to go to. They could join the army, or they could become prostitutes and join a brothel. That's it. There was no social network of the state to look after them. All this changed dramatically over the last 2 centuries, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution gave the market immense new powers, and it provided the state with new means of communication and transportation, like the radio and television and the railroads and so forth. Also, all the wealth created by the Industrial Revolution enabled governments to start employing an army, not just of soldiers, but also an army of teachers and policemen and social workers and tax collectors and all the other government employees. When the market and the state tried to use their growing powers, they discovered that their attempts to start controlling the lives of people were blocked by the power of the families and the communities. The families and the communities, when the state and the market became stronger, the family elders and the leaders of the communities did not like this new outside intervention from the police and from the school system and from the government and the market. Parents and community elders were reluctant to let the younger generation to be indoctrinated by nationalist education in the schools of the state. Similarly, they didn't like the idea of giving their children away to be conscripted into armies. And they didn't like the idea of the younger generation leaving the village and migrating to the city to become urban workers, what is called the proletariat. In order to overcome these obstacles, the states and the markets, as they became more and more powerful, they tried to weaken the traditional bonds of family and community. For example, the state sent law enforcement officers, policemen, to control family vendettas and to stop family and community violence. Similarly, the market started intervening in the affairs of families and communities and to convince people to follow the fashions of the market, not the traditions of their family or their village or their tribe. But this was difficult because the family and the community were very, very strong. So in order to really break the power of the family and the community, the state and the market needed somebody from inside to help them. They needed somebody from inside the family to work against the family, somebody from inside the community to work against the community. And this somebody was the individual. The state and the market during the 19th and 20th century, they approached people with an offer that couldn't be refused. The state and the market came to you and me and told us, become individuals. What does it mean to become individuals? Well, you are free from the power of your parents and community elders. You can marry whoever you want. You don't have to ask permission from your parents who to marry. You can take up whatever kind of job you want. Even if your community elders don't like this job, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to ask these community elders. You can live anywhere you want. You don't like your village? Fine, leave your village, go to the city in the other side of the country. It's okay. If you can't come every week to the family dinner, it doesn't matter. You are no longer dependent on your family and on your community. So who will take care of you? We will take care of you. We, the state and the market, we will take care of everything you need, which was previously taken care of by the family and the community. We will provide you with jobs. We will provide you with education. We will establish a health system, a welfare system, employment system, which will provide everything you need. We will even provide you with pensions and insurance, so you are not dependent on your family and community. It is very common, especially in romantic literature, to present the individual as somebody who is all the time struggling against the state and the market. But this is completely wrong. This is just the opposite of what really happened. The state and the market are actually the mother and father of the individual, and the individual cannot survive and couldn't have appeared without the help of the state and the market. The market today is the one that provides us individuals with work, with insurance, with a pension. If you want to study a profession, you don't have to count on your family anymore. The schools maintained by the government will teach you, or the colleges maintained by the market. If you want to open a business, you're no longer dependent on your family. The bank will loan you money. If you want to build a house, you don't have to ask your cousins to come and help build it. You go to a construction company, and it builds it for you. And if you don't have money to pay the construction company, then the bank gives you a loan, or the government gives you a mortgage, a kind of loan. If violence flares up around you, then you don't have to run to your uncle or your father or the community elders to protect you. There is police. You go to the police. Even if you are threatened by your own family, you go to the state, you go to the police and ask protection from the state against your family. Similarly, if you are sick, you are no longer dependent on your family and community. There is a state health system, and there is hospitals and clinics run by the market. They are taking care of you. If you need treatment around the clock, you need somebody to be all the time with you. Say you had an accident, then you no longer have to count on even on your children. If you don't have any children, it doesn't matter. Even if you do have children, they won't do it for you. Today, you go to the market and you hire a nurse, usually some stranger from the other side of the world, to take care of you. And he or she will take care of you in ways that today fewer and fewer people expect even from their own children. Similarly, the tax authorities no longer tax entire communities. They treat us as individuals. Nobody is expected to pay the taxes of his neighbors. The law enforcement system treats us now as individuals. You're not punished for the crimes committed by your cousin. You're only punished for your own crime. You're an individual. Not only adult men, but also women and children have been increasingly recognized by the state and the market as individuals. For most of history, women were seen as the property of the family or of the community. In contrast, modern states and markets increasingly see women as individuals who have independent legal rights and independent economic rights. Women may now hold their own bank accounts. Women decide on their own who to marry. They can even choose to divorce their husbands and live on their own, which was unthinkable in many societies until a very short time ago. But the liberation of the individual from the control of family and community also made them far more vulnerable to the intervention of the state and of the market. We today are far less constrained by what our father or our village elder tells us to do. But we are far more exposed than ever before to the power of the government and of the big business people, of the big corporations. In traditional societies, the state and the market had difficulty telling people what to do because the family and the community shielded people from these interventions. Now, in the modern age, the state and the market can intervene in our lives to a far greater extent because of the weakening of the family and the community. So, was it worth it? Are people today better off or worse off than what they were before all these changes? Are people better off when they are free from the control of their families and communities, but are simultaneously subject to the increasing power of the state and of the market? It's very hard to say, it's very hard to answer. Still, no matter what you think about this process, and different people think very different things, what everybody can agree is that it is amazing how fast this transformation happened. For millions of years, humans have been living as members of intimate communities and families. For the last few thousand years, all kinds of cities and kingdoms and empires grew, but still, the kingdoms and the empires and the cities were still composed of families and communities. Now, within a mere 2 centuries, say from 1800 onwards, from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, within a mere 2 centuries, we have become alienated individuals living within these states and markets, but with less and less importance for the families and the communities. Of course, families are still important. They did not completely disappear. When states and markets took away from the family most of its economic and political roles, they left the family with some important emotional functions. The modern family is still supposed to provide for our intimate and romantic and sexual needs, which the state and the markets are still not capable of providing themselves. Yet even here, the family is subject to increasing interventions. The market shapes to an ever greater degree the way that people conduct their romantic relationships and their sexual lives, whereas traditionally the family was the main matchmaker. The family decided who will marry whom according to the interests of the family. Today, it's the market that shapes our romantic and sexual preferences, and it's the market that then helps us to fulfill these sexual and romantic fantasies. Previously, in traditional societies, the bride and the groom would meet in the living room of one of the families, and the parents of each side will discuss the possibility of marriage, and money will pass from the hands usually of one father into the hands of another father. And this was how the deal was made. Today, in contrast, courting, looking for a mate, is done in the cafes and bars and the internet provided by the market. And money passes from the hands of the couple into the hands of the waitresses in the cafe. Even more money is transferred to the bank accounts of fashion designers, gym managers, dietitians, cosmeticians, plastic surgeons, and so forth, who help us to arrive at our date looking as similar as possible to the ideal of beauty that the market implanted in our heads. The state, too, keeps a much sharper eye on family relations than ever before, especially relations between parents and children. In the modern world, parents are obliged to send their children to be educated by the states. Parents who are especially abusive or violent with their children may be restrained by the state. If the need arises, the state even have the power and the legitimacy to imprison the parents or to transfer their children, to take away the children of parents who are too violent and transfer them to foster families. Until not very long ago, even the suggestion that the state ought to prevent parents from beating or humiliating their children would have sounded ridiculous, impossible. It would have been rejected completely. Because in most societies, parental authority was sacred. Respect and obedience to your parents was amongst the most valued principles of human societies. And in most human societies, traditional societies, parents could do almost anything they wanted with their children, including killing newborn babies. If a baby was born and the parents didn't want it, they didn't have money to support it, they could kill it. They could sell their children into slavery, or they could marry off their children to whoever they wanted to. Like the parents could take their daughter, say a 12-year-old daughter, and marry her off to some 50-year-old man whom she never met before because this man gave the parents money or sheep or goats. This was very acceptable in traditional societies for parents to have such power over their children. Today, the authority of the parents is diminishing rapidly. The state passed laws that greatly diminished what parents can do with their children. Popular culture similarly sanctifies the freedom of children from their parents. In all the TV shows and movies and so forth, the freedom of children from the dictates of the parents becomes a main principle. Whereas in traditional China, for example, obedience to your parents was the number one value, the most important value was to obey and respect your parents. In the modern West, and increasingly also in other parts of the world, it has become customary to view parents as the servants of their children. And no matter what parents do for their children, it is never enough. In modern Western psychology, it's customary to blame the parents for anything that goes wrong in the life of their children. If in the Freudian courtroom, when you go to a psychologist to discuss your life, the parents, mom and dad, have as much chance of being acquitted from guilt as defendants in a Stalinist show trial. They have no chance at all. Communities too, like the families, the ancient communities did not completely disappear. Since humans evolved for millions and millions of years as communal creatures that need to feel part of some tribe, the community in the modern world could not just disappear completely without something replacing it. People need to feel that they are part of some group, of some tribe. But what happened in the modern world is that in many parts of the world, the intimate communities vanished, and they were replaced not by new kinds of intimate communities, but by national and market communities, the communities of the state and the market. Now, what exactly is an intimate community? Well, when I speak here and when I spoke previously about intimate communities, I don't mean communities like your friends on Facebook. What I mean is a group of people who you know very, very well. You knew them for years. You observed them in all kinds of situations, including very difficult situations. You know their character. And most importantly, your life, your daily life, your very survival depends on them. These are your tribe members. You may not like them. It's not that everybody is so fond of the other. In an intimate community, one of the characteristics is that you can't just wake up in the morning and go away and break your ties with the communities. You're bound with it. Your survival depends on them, like an ancient tribe or an ancient village. This is a real intimate community. And this is very different from most of the things that we today speak about when we use the term community. So these kinds of communities that you know everybody very well and your survival depends on your contact with these people. Whether you like them or not doesn't matter. Your survival depends on them. Such kinds of communities are becoming more and more rare. You have many communities on the internet, but if you can survive without them. Instead, the identity of people today is based more and more with an identification with their state. The state becomes their community, or with an identification with their position in the market. The market becomes their community. The identification with the state is called nationalism. People in the modern world identify themselves less and less as belonging to a particular family or a particular community, a village or a tribe or something, say 100 people that I actually know. Instead, I identify myself more and more with my state and with my nation. I am an Israeli. I say I'm an Israeli even though I never met 99% of other Israelis. I still imagine all of them to be part of the same community. So this is one replacement for the old intimate communities, is these new national communities, which are very different because we don't know 99% of the people who are supposed to be part of our community. Even more remarkable is our growing identification with the market, or with the positions that we occupy within the market. People around the world increasingly build their identity as consumers, as belonging to particular consumer tribes. This sounds very strange, but we are surrounded by examples of such consumer tribes. For example, the fans of movie stars and singers like Madonna. Madonna fans constitute a consumer tribe. They define themselves largely by what they buy and what they consume. They buy tickets to the concerts of Madonna. They buy CDs, they buy posters, they buy shirts, they buy ringtones, and thereby they define who they are by what they buy and what they consume. Similarly, Manchester United fans, they are also a consumer tribe. Vegetarians, at least many vegetarians, are a consumer tribe. They define themselves by what they buy and eat, or not buy and not eat. And environmentalists, who all the time are very careful what they buy and what they consume and so forth, they are a consumer tribe. They are defined by what they consume. And it is very, very important for people, this market identity. A German vegetarian might well prefer to marry a French vegetarian and not a German carnivore, because her identity as a vegetarian, somebody who does not buy and consume meat products, is more important to her than her national identity. So in this segment, we examined the most important social revolution of the modern age, the collapse of the family and the intimate community, and the rise of the state and the market. In the next segment, we will examine how this revolution and the other revolutions of the modern age change the very fabric of the human order and of human politics. We will see how the human order in the world became at one and the same time much more volatile than ever before and much more peaceful than ever before.